Alright, 당도 우마디믹 다디 저 가르레스는다 여름 책이 남 저기 샘기 묘몽바케기 동아영이 규조의 묘몽바들의 샤스 다 묘몽바 나네 양조 묘몽바 차상용수 규조의 덴진 다신 마릭바세리스 지선다 다신 마릭바디 매바 쇠발라 만주게 가르가니스 매바 쇠거라네 대 디 도초 동반이 도비로 예제 아니 디 콤발레 때네 매바 쇠고고레스 지선 데네 인자 다 델이야 동반이 또야다 동반이다 아니电竞这个区域电竞的东巴的电竞松度区域落地方这个举来解法切第解法切呢你们的这些呢牛毛把的没法学会的的学会过来是的呢刚刚写他的他不能描述的地理是我的送过了
Good morning. Last night then we started to look at this text by His Holiness, the key to the Middle Way. The topic of this text is firstly to identify that the principal cause of all our suffering are our afflicted minds. These afflictions which arise nearly continuously within our continuum, these are what cause our suffering. And their root cause is the affliction that is the ignorance of self-grasping. Thereafter the text presents that having recognized this, we then need to look at the antidote and how to apply that antidote in order to be able to eradicate the root cause of all suffering and thereby gain freedom from suffering. And the antidote is the wisdom realizing emptiness. The contrary mind to the ignorance of self-grasping is the wisdom realizing emptiness. So therefore, we will come to see how to cultivate the wisdom understanding emptiness as well as the wisdom understanding dependent arising. These two cultivated together lead to a powerful wisdom realizing emptiness, the very best or the supreme of all antidotes that will lead to the complete eradication of all suffering.
제사단 데네기 동바단 텐주기 남샤 롭장 제야리아 안에 데네기 제야들이야 안에 지게 중 개천볼이야 안에 다야기 뒤수다 데네기 안에 뒤수미야바 지다 데네기 동바인 텐주기 다위 남샤래 롭장 제야기 되니기 두바여바 안데리아 안에 지게 로직 리바 예디겐 절이야 안에 데네기 중 개천볼 다야고 말해도 대소라 강소 대소라 미전에야 안지 직 돌뒤에 안 돈다 닝보디게 마 두스제는 야음치 송기 인생에 가서 온두스제네 나저 가서 디셰사르와
In addition to presenting the topic of this text, last night we also looked at for whom His Holiness composed this text. So he has presented here in this text the presentation on emptiness as well as dependence arising. And he's taken what the teachings of the Buddha, which were commentated on by many great masters in a vast array of profound texts, and he's condensed their meaning, taken their essence, and put it in this brief text. And he's written this text in particular for those who have a deep desire to come to understand emptiness as well as dependence arising, but they lack the opportunity to be able to study the profound root texts, and rather he has then taken the meaning of those root texts and condensed them into this brief text. And moreover, in addition to the quality of aspiring to study emptiness and dependence arising, this text is also written for those who are of sharp intelligence and can come to understand these profound topics.
dunga midela ngara chasan dewa gugu ores chasan dunga gugu ma dunga se gugu ores ngara chasan chigbare so rande nam dewa dyeje dunga midye chasan dewa dye ba dewa de ngangso lu gugu ores and dunga de ngazo se gugore sen deni druba da sewa yang se de ngazo dewa de ngazo gugorwa dewa dewa zang ngazo dewa de drupu gores ngazo dunga midyo ban zang ngazo dunga yoba de pa se da mewa dunga majung de ngongo je da di che gugores dene ane de je gugores de sungorda de sewa yang se di ba de re de.
Now turning to the text, looking at the next outline, that of the path to happiness. So here now we come to the main body of the text. And here His Holiness is now fleshing out the purpose for this text and why, and not just for the purpose of the text, but why we need to come to understand this topic of emptiness and dependence arising, or understand the presentation on emptiness and dependence arising. And that is because, as we see here now looking at the text, we all want happiness and do not want to suffer. So here in these first few words, the purpose for coming to understand this topic is presented. But in order to achieve happiness, in order to attain a state of lasting, stable happiness, we need to, and the line continues, and the achievement of happiness. So happiness needs to be cultivated.
Dan deva digi deva druba dan dunga sewa se kugore and deyan karres ne lunga yisum yu joba la rale shins. Chesanda dunga se dan digi dubya di kahwale tingor lunga yisum yu joba la rale gore. Lunga yisum yu joba di yakho chingba na and nganzo keho digi drub tu dewa drubya dare. Lunga yisum yu joba di yakho ma chingba na dela den dunga yongor. Chesanda lunga yisum yu joba di ane yakho yonga duga di pa kaya dan ane yakho yonga di drupu gore. Chesanda lunga yisum yu joba la rale lu yu joba dan nga yu joba yi joba la rale gore jere.
Not only does happiness need to be cultivated, but suffering needs to be eliminated. And how is this done? Well, it depends upon the deeds of body, speech, and mind. So if our physical activities, our verbal communication, and our way of thinking is wholesome or virtuous, we will be accomplishing the causes for happiness. On the other hand, though, if our way of thinking and the resulting verbal communication and way of physical interaction is unwholesome or non-virtuous, suffering will develop, suffering will increase.
Dene ngāgi chöbarwa, dzun xie, tsikzu xie ngāgi chöbarwa. Chizan tsikzu xie ba, dzun xie ba di karachi gorsana, pacho midiliya nugu gore, ko makiba su gore, ko khortan gorwa. Di jingi soso yine, anda soso le na makiba chaya, kanga chaya da chagwa, ngāgi chöba digi. Dela dene ngāgi chöba kanga li gore. Chizan di ngāgi chöbi ki yongba za, da dene ki dunga yongaya di, dene chi ngāgi chöba la dene dunga yong gore. Di se go gore chere. Da kane se gore sana, ngāgi gōne xiānli dzūn ma xieba, ngāgi gōne xiānli cizū ma xieba xie di pā gā jie, ngāgi gōne xiānli ya nā ki xieba nā ka zhāngu zhāngxia xie dāng, ngāgi gōne xiānli ya jianbi cik dūs jine mē jie di xieba ina, dini xiānli na digi yung gō res, ngāgi zūne sōsō ina digi na digi yung gō res, chisa ngāgi jōba la dini digi dunga yongā di pā gā jie, ngāgi jōba la dini digi yongā di digi dhūku gō res ya jie.
So how is it that the accomplishment or the achievement of happiness and the elimination of suffering depends upon the deeds of our body, speech, and mind? Well, if we think about it, if we engage in unwholesome behavior, such as lying to others or speaking harshly to others, so we engage in this illustration, a verbal unwholesome behavior. This is an expression of our own unhappy mind. And through expressing our own unhappy mind, we compound it, we make it stronger. So therefore, through engaging in unwholesome activities, such as these verbal activities, we strengthen and amplify our own suffering. Moreover, the recipient of our harsh speech, the recipient of our lies, their suffering increases as well. So therefore, suffering is compounded for ourselves and others should we engage in unwholesome behavior. And as suffering is what we need to eliminate, we need to then recognize this, the causes of suffering, and then come to understand the technique for abandoning this. So firstly, we then need to stop unwholesome behavior, and accompanying this, we need to engage in the opposite behavior, in wholesome behavior. So instead of lying to others, we need to speak in an honest and a straightforward manner. And instead of speaking in a harsh or an abrupt manner, speaking in a gentle and a kind way. When one does this, one's own mental state is in a peaceful and relaxed state. Hence, the expression of our mental state, our verbal expression of our mental state, is wholesome. So we ourselves are happy. We are achieving our desired happiness. And the recipients of our pleasant speech, our gentle speech, their mind is also, either if they're unhappy, their unhappiness is eased, or if they're in a good mental state, that is amplified. So therefore, by us turning away from non-virtue and engaging in virtue, not only are we happy, but we bring happiness to others too.
아주 동아 영화야지 리뷰 줘발래 되는 리고래 아주 되게 주비야 되는 리뷰 줘발래 되는 되게 주고 그래 제가 리뷰 줘베 가르세네 리뷰 줘베 터네 샹리야 아니 예동 다야 샹기 자라 구마자야 안 샹리야 지게 자와 다야라 소바 되는 샹리 강아제 리뷰 거네 샹라 강아제 망고 여러 봐다 베네 셈젠로 지네 바 제모진 바지게 고고가로 쉔 콜리아직 예동 땅바 대샤 다야다 되네기 니강아 때 망고여로 봐 제자 류유건 되게 류기 줘봐 되네 제바이나 대설 되네 동알리고레스 제자 콘줄레 동알리고레 마라줄레 동아주 미션데게 잘라지 구마잡 샹리아 아치 왕여다 제왕 땅바이나 그두들에 파셔들에 강아티고 봐 안젤라 소소야 안지 강아티고 오데큐 코구마 잡샤 그 투제 다샤스는 아니 중 지기 팀도네 소소 강아티 전강루야다 게디나 강아티 리고 지라신 이가 강아티도 류기 쥐베토네 강아티 용고레스 제산디 류기 쥐바디 강아티 용어자 강아티 세고고는자 데네기 류기 쥐바디 까고고레 디네 류기 쥐바디 비슈탄 교 말해서 그래 나 류기 쥐베토네 가르쳐고래라는 류기 쥐베토네 셴리야 같이 지까지 판도제야다 판도제야다 강기 토네 먼저 신의 판도제바다 류유군 진이 판도제 로제야다 셴라 제바이나 디기 안에 셴라 팽규거레스 제가 디기 팬바자 셴라 판도 안미 랑이네 어당이 코슬레 판도제도에 배 야고충 선배 소슬리에 셈리야 대랑라 좀 거레스 미생기나 어디 미팅을 하려 로봇도 미 디기 로봇 지거서야지 되네 미디기 배 야고지거서 워싱나 마신 점류양라 차산에 캡제네 안 소소라야 뛰어가라고 그래서 미차산 셈나 가랑라 디 로봇치가 빼야고요래 셈비 미션달에 셈리아 가랑라 제야다 디기 툭툭고래 소소이네 안 소소라랑기 귤라 안지 가랑라 용고래 디기 툭툭고 제가 되네 인사 라신 이가랴 디기 툭툭고래 제가 류기 쥐베고네 소소리 디기 툭단 되네래 제가 류기 쥐베고네 소소리야 강아 셴리아 강아 용타디 파디세고 가고래 세디송고르다
Similarly, with our physical behavior, in dependence on our body or our physical behavior, we can achieve happiness or create causes for further suffering. So, for example, if we engage in physical conflict with others, fight with them, beat them, etc., or we steal from others, or we try and dominate others in some way, we ourselves, at that time, are suffering. When we're acting in such a way, the motivation that leads to this is afflicted, and therefore we are suffering. Moreover, the recipient of our physical altercations, or whose possessions are being stolen, or whose being dominated by us, they are suffering too. So here we firstly, just like with the previous illustration, need to recognize the faults of unwholesome behavior. Recognize what is unwholesome behavior through recognizing its faults. And then we need to stop it. Stop engaging in such behavior. And how to do so? More than just relying on self-discipline, one needs to use our intelligence, cultivate wisdom. We need to, through seeing the faults of unwholesome behavior, we also then need to see the benefits of wholesome behavior. So here we cultivate our intelligence, our wisdom, and we see the benefits of when we physically interact with others, to do so in a wholesome manner. That benefit comes to others as well as ourselves. So rather than dominating others and abusing others, we should help them. Utilize our skills and our qualities to benefit others. And we see from when we do engage in others like this based on our own experience, we know that we develop close and harmonious relationships with them. We are seen as someone trustworthy. Others talk well about us. And why this is so important is that when we are in their presence, they are comfortable and relaxed. And therefore, they also relate to us in a way that expresses this comfortable and relaxed state of mind. So therefore, when we physically interact with others in a wholesome way, not only is our mental state happier, but so too are others.
Tisanda lunga deni luida nga yugoni deni choba ngamba choba dukcha cha jeba ina ane that sedeli yang rashini kala kanga cheba yo yungu ba mase andigi lengamba sache lengamba chinga simite do bacha sha ndi wangi kewa chimalia nga zugi andunga nyongo ya da nga sol ke ya da ndene yungu re chesa ndi lunga gi choba ngamba le tene seteda randa shenniga le dunga de mase kewa chimali ne and di wangi nga sol ke ya da and dunga nyongo ya chago re jero ala.
When one engages in unwholesome or non-virtuous behavior in this life, whether physical or verbal behavior, not only does that lead to compounding our own suffering as well as the suffering of others right now, but we accumulate non-virtuous karma. And that non-virtuous karma, when it ripens in our future lives as it will, our suffering continues. So therefore, through engaging in non-virtuous physical and verbal behavior, not only do we and others suffer in this life, but we suffer in our future lives as well.
Geshe Shanlia and Lunga Gone Shanlia Pandobaina, Benenga Gone Shangi, Mashing Benisulia, Lojan Padin Jordan, Kanangan Kane Shea, Lojan Je, Koi Pai Shingbache, and Sam Shingbache, then call a Pingorwa, and call a Pambaina, and Anzule, and the Diki Yungur Cesa, and Naga Gone Shanlia Pemba Duviata, Lu Gone Shanlia Pemba Duvaina, and the Lunga Gijuba Telatine, and then Azuki Dunga Yungumares, Chesan Telatine, and the Shanlia Diki Yungur, Rala Diki, Cetela Diki Yungur, Timas Digi Lunga Lady Les Ambosa Gore, and Digi Tibuti, Kewachi Mangato, Dendrolia, Yoyata, and Tiata, D, and the Digi Yaki, Gusagore, Chesan Lunga Gijuba, Sambo Jubaina, Delatine, Yakuchungores. Lunga Juba Namba Chunguna, Delatine, Dunga Yungor. Shisanga Dunga Seadi, Lunga Yuchuba Nambati Kabana, Dunga Segores, Lunga Yuchuba Sambo Dubaina, and the Digi Yuha to work. She's a Digi to Viata, Dunga Seadi, do Sides.
To the extent that one develops a wholesome outlook and engages in wholesome or virtuous behavior with others, again, whether physical or verbal behavior, only benefit comes from this. So if we interact with others in a loving and a kind way, for example, speaking to others in a gentle manner, physically showing them kindness, then in this way, we help ease the suffering of others. We help ease the suffering of others through either physically helping them or being skillful, giving skillful advice. So in this way, we ease the suffering of others, increase their happiness as well, and we ourselves are happy too. So there's benefit to self and others right now. Moreover, through engaging in this way, we are accumulating virtuous karma. And this virtuous karma, when it ripens as it will in our future lives, it will ripen as happy experiences. For example, we will accumulate the causes for good rebirths as a human or a god in our future lives. So here we see the benefits that come from cultivating a wholesome outlook and engaging in beneficial interactions with others.
Dine ko gaguyo marwa, ko majiwa le sarwa. Dine ko majiwa le do ko khon la de digi nganzu le su la yong ra. La dine nganzu majiwa chawa da ko du de ra khon ra ra shi ni ga majiwa cha da. Den jing nganzu go khor da jia san xie ji go khor dang ji go khor dang wen ko du de le ko nganzu ga la mo na je la o ko di ngal jia san xie di go khor dang xia san dine khon la je nganzu le gyun ju che da ji yong ro. Dine jing nganzu su bu go ne lu yu go ne xian ju gu mo ko da xian la ne ba ji bai na. Dine lam sa 파지 슈위네 어투가 가시 슈 투지 슈용으로 지는 간주 차상을야 투부자 증해야 되는데 니가라 강아지 거로 지난 저기 기치배 좀나디에 님 전부체 기치 님기고 셰베네 파를 셰베네 민워신나래 마신바네 파래 기치 야고 셰베네 수련 넘겨 야고 된 기치 야고 셰데 님 편진 니가야 셈야 되기 용해야 돼 시차고래 지난 간주 류유권의 셴리야 팬비게 로바 제베네 안어디 배하고 중소서 투치해야다 미지 저서 투치해야다 안에 그런 게 있네 나서 로바 제투네 지기로 와 진짜 라신이게 팬버도 용거바디 띵아 저기 우연히 수용한 저기 세워하고 해야 돼 당 저기
I don't think what I've been saying here in these last couple of segments is really new for anyone here, because whether one's Buddhist or not, certainly everyone in society knows that this is true from their own experience. We know that when we are unhappy and we take our mood out on others, we're just spreading this negativity that we're feeling, we're spreading to all those unfortunate enough to be around us. And what happens? At the very least, they become unhappy. Most likely, they respond to us now under the influence of this unhappy mind that has arisen within them because of ourselves taking out our bad mood on them. So if we speak to others in a harsh manner, then they're likely to respond to us in a similar manner. Or if we deceive others, steal from others, we will break the relationship of trust with them or prevent any relationship of trust growing. Or if they later come to find out that we lied to them, that we took advantage of them, they will get angry with us. And when we meet again, they are quite likely to express that anger to us, maybe even hit us. At the very least, will not like us, will not want to be around us, and will not like us and not want to be around us. However, we also know from our own experience that when we speak to others in a gentle manner, we show kindness to others, whether they are people that are dear to us or they're strangers, whomever they may be. The happiness that we feel within us is spread and shared with those that we encounter. And this leads to either their own unhappiness, if they're unhappy at the time, dissipating, or if they are in a good mood, their happiness increasing. And they are likely then to respond to us, to interact with us in a similar manner. So this we know from our own experience. There's part of the text here is establishing the motivation, not the motivation, sorry, the purpose of all that is still to come. So now His Holiness makes the key point that our physical and verbal behavior, whether wholesome or unwholesome, comes about independent on a motivating consciousness, a motivating mind. And that's presented then in the next sentence. As the actions of body and speech depend upon the mind, we must therefore constructively transform the mind.
그래서 다 류유 줘봐다 하게 줘봐 약보도 용다 냠바 용구여버디 셈을 하리고 그러지. 지금 셈을 간다 하리고 생각하도 셈을야 셴래야 뇌배 삼바다 셴라 통중 다야 삼로 안셴기 이제 컨트롤지 셴래 컨트롤 세고 컨트롤 셈래야 셈진이 줘봐이나 근데 나기 관에 가르쳐 왔으네 편이 직접 셔야다 근데 이게고 허다 자서 셔야다 셈래가 받리바네 디 군롱 셈기 토네 류지가 줘봐 된걸 셈기 파쇼 미들야 펜비에 삼바지다 콜리아 로지기 콜리 장부지긴 셈비 삼로 장부지기 셈비 삼로 지구 삼로 된시 켜바이나 아니 계시셔바이네 장부장셔셔야 인기시데 잠지 전부터는 셔야지 디리고 저자 나게 줘벌래야지 약도 내야지 군롱 셈래야 셈기 나게 군용로야게 셈디 상한라라래 버려 셈비 상부 줘바이나 나게 군에 직접벌래야지 약고실리고 그래 군롱 셈 남바질래바이나 디 나게 줘바디 남바실리고 저자 나게 줘바 약도 세야지 군롱 셈을 라리고 디난 직바를 류래야 류유고네 근데 셴래야 나 셈래야 셴래 판배 삼바단 제외 삼바 로지군 셈배 삼로 레바나 류유고네 셴래 판바 제바다 로지야지 리고래 단 류유고네 나 셈들래야 셴이 잘라대가 꾸고 셈이 꾸에 그 초도게 삼바 안 딘디겨 바나 안 셴이 류유고네 셴이 잘라 꾸모 꾸야다 샬라 네부게지 류고 제가 류가 그 줘봐 약도디 군로 셈 약도 리고래 삼바 상보데 약고 줘봐나 류가 그 줘봐데 약고시 리고래 군로 셈바 남바다 누구 줘봐나 디 류이 줘봐데 야 누가 리고래 샬라 네바시 리고래 제가 셈나 라래 바레세 디스고로
This then is a key point that His Holiness is making here, that whether one's speech or physical behavior is wholesome or not depends on the motivating mind. If the mind is unhappy, it's very likely that resulting speech or behavior will be non-virtuous. If the mind, the stronger the afflictions are within the mind, the stronger the likelihood of an unwholesome behavior following. So, for example, if one's mind is dominated by attachment's very strong, one's desiring something, due to the dominance of this afflicted mind of attachment, we will take something that is not ours. We will take something knowing that it is someone else's, and we will disregard that. We will see the fulfillment of our desire, this mental consciousness of desire, to see the fulfillment of that as being more important than whether someone values that object or not. Similarly, if our self-interest is very strong, we will deceive others, take advantage of others, because we'll be regarding what we want as primary, as most important. If we don't regard others much, but our mind is afflicted, thinking just about ourselves, we will take advantage of others. And this is the case for both verbal behavior and physical behavior. To the extent that our mind is afflicted, to that extent we are likely to engage in unwholesome physical and verbal behavior, and again, to the extent that our mind is afflicted, to that extent the strength of our resulting physical and verbal behavior will be harmful to others.
motor the Gyobo draw motor the Sulawayas, motor Tangan Lavayro, Gyobo to motor Tangan the Gyobo Tavan, motor the Gyobo to war, Gili Chevene, Gili to war, motor Tangan the Lagamaji de Vena, motor the Dediorwa, Chibarwa, Lunga Juba said, motor Gyobo Troya the Jedi, Data, and then same Job Tandi, now motor Tangana Chibaredwa. In a general, same key the Chito, somebody, Ludi, Rameva, Kuju, and Drosha, Drogumes and did digging some Samlon, let it digging some Samlon, Subudi Gugunema, and did Digorwa. Chesang, Samlo de Chigi, the Chicom, Uchi, let me say, Techitu, near Samlo Jan, Junema, the Tele Techitu, near Devana, Ludi Gugu, Tangma de Digorwa. Chesang, some Bejo, some lot pa, Shijema, Chitu. And we are going to some of the Leo, the knee shepherd parley, this would marry you or what is that? And Luna get biggie, Jeda, Mache said, Chazan similar Raliaba, but the motor Dangan in the same Chadurwa, Chazan Dineza, same social tangores, same social Navan, same day social the Yabu Chatu, but the Luna Chuba Yabuligres, same social, same Nanglo, some of the Dujas lady when the Luna Chuba Duja Ligres or that.
If we liken our body and our speech to a vehicle, a motor vehicle, we know a car will not go anywhere unless there is a driver. And our mind, in the analogy, is like the driver. The driver determines the direction the car will travel in, the speed that the car will travel in. So similarly, our mind determines the direction that our physical and verbal behavior will go in. So therefore, if through mindfulness we take control of our own mind and keep it on virtue, ensure that it's not overwhelmed by afflictions, but that virtuous minds arise, our physical and verbal behavior towards others will be skillful, will be kind, will be gentle, and will be wise, bringing benefit to both them and ourselves. So, for example, when one has developed a powerful, concentrated mind, meditation, when one holds the object of meditation in an undistracted manner, single-pointed manner, one is not then going to engage in any distracted activity at all. One will not be speaking or moving around because one's mind is concentrated. One's holding one's object still. In fact, the only physical behavior one may engage in then is while one is sitting on the meditation cushion, one's body may fall over. But other than that, there will be no movement because of the strength of the mind. So the mind here, we can liken to a driver determining the direction and the speed that a car goes in, the car being our physical and verbal behavior.
Subu Dawa Sunga Sungje, and Jige Zogo Moya down to Lo Kaya La Sobada, the Nigi Zogo Yen Chu Juya, the Nigi Subu Dawa Javana, the same Suju, similar Dawa Javore, same Suj Tangorech. That Delia, same Suju Chilukan, the same the Canis Suju Chiwara, Suju, Ben Suju Chetadia, Canis Juatan, Suju, Juatangores, same Juatan had Canis Tanguri Labna, that Delia, same nurture. Sim Nutrigen Mikiawadang, Sampi Rikiching, Pelwa Chiki Tides, Chesan Sim Sugotan said, the same Juatan said, the Kara said, Sim Nutrigen, Sim Nutridi the Pa Maki Kimena, Makiele, Mungoche, Pa Sunyache, Ki Yobana, Pa Maba Suadies, Nurtu Sim Nurtu Jen Mikiawas. That's it, Sambi Rikti, Sim Sambi Riki, Kimena, Kansun Yang, some of the Kichuatan. Sim Sambi Rangula, Sosor Gula, Kiyobaina, the Anna and some that more compared to ideas. She's a DJ, Sim Sugotan had the DDS order.
So here, the primacy of mind is being established. Here, it's also good to be clear that the more skillful one is mentally, the more rapid our transformation will come. For example, if one has to hand wash clothing, but hasn't got knowledge or experience about how to do so, one's clothing is likely not to become very clean. But if one understands well and knows what to do, one's clothing will become spotless. So here, in order to clean our physical and verbal behavior, this depends on the skill of the mind. The next sentence then brings about how to constructively transform the mind. The ways of constructively transforming the mind are to cause mistaken states of consciousness not to arise, and wholesome states of consciousness to be both generated and increased. So here, in dependence on the knowledge that one is gaining, as well as the skill one is developing in meditation in relation to that knowledge, one starts to become ever more mindful of our mental process. And through this, when we see an unwholesome mind, an afflicted mind arise, one immediately eliminates it. Moreover, one guards one's mind to ensure that afflictions do not arise, but should they do, one eliminates them. And together with this process, guarding against the arisal of afflictions, one also, at the same time, ensures that one's mind stays on virtuous objects. In other words, one's mind stays wholesome. And moreover, where certain wholesome mental states one is not so used to, not so habituated to, one intentionally cultivates these, strengthening or developing these new virtuous ways of thinking. And where one is already inclined to a particular virtuous way of thinking, that inclination one develops further and strengthens. So it's these two processes one engages in, being mindful of one's mental state, preventing the arisal of the afflictions and eliminating them should they arise, and whilst being mindful of one's mental state, keeping one's mind on virtue, strengthening virtuous minds, increasing virtuous minds.
Sim no true shangi and jiki jala roshi bene kuma jawa sembe some no de sim no true. Sim no true and Zangas Tenigi Namuni shangi jala kuma jawa sembe kuma jawa kulon some no den shuba ina. Jala Guyong, Chazan Dinigi Yobaina, or Daddy Yapo Mati Shana Nudure, and Kumaina, Anji, Shangi, Sosoralia, Nevatana, Gangatig, Resembig, some of the windows and some of the pa, Gaia, the Chimbochagor, Chazan, some of the notary to Kuma, Shangi Jala Kuwas, Kudugi, some of the Butusi and Gyanta sometime. And I guess that Dini Meva in there, Nasan, Gedi in there. Jengi Jala, Kuma Jason Zawin, Jimia, Sembe, some of the Takiman, Yana, to do some Tawaina, Guya, some of the Kudu, some of the Makia, Gago, what some notary cars at Garo. That's some very yes, said you, that the Shangi Guya, Jala Kudu, some of the Parka. That Gume, Shangi, Jala said, Okuma said Zawin, Jima, Sembe, some of the Yana, that's some very Deing on the Yana, some Namana, Yanuba Church at the yes, or that patient was Chunjo the Sheba and the Dirwa.
So give an easy illustration to hopefully make this clear. Being mindful of our mental state whilst going about our activities, being mindful of our mental process. When we notice a mind arise, independent on our prior training, we need to recognize whether that mind is wholesome or unwholesome, virtuous or non-virtuous. So if the thought arises that I want to take something, I want to steal something, it's not mine, and I want to take it, we already know that that is an unwholesome way of thinking. Because this way of thinking already harms oneself and certainly is likely to lead to us engaging in unwholesome physical behavior and stealing, and thereby harm coming to not only ourselves but to others as well. So being mindful of this arisal of the thought, I want to take that, I want to steal that, and being aware that this is unwholesome and only leads to harm, we then recognize that this is not a mind to allow to strengthen within us through habituation, or certainly not to act under the influence of. Then, as well as that set of thought processes, accompanying that, having recognized that an affliction has arisen, we then apply an antidote. And the antidote here is quite straightforward, recognizing the faults of stealing, the faults of the arisal of attachment, and certainly the faults of acting under it. Allowing ourselves to become ever more habituated to the attachment that leads us to want to steal creates causes for us to suffer in the future. Moreover, should we act under the influence, not only does that create further causes for us to suffer, it will bring harm to others. So here we generate the thought, I don't want to steal. I don't want to take what others value. I don't want to be controlled by my attachments and my desire because of the harm that will come to me as well as to others. And not only right now, but also in future lives. So here, through the process of mindfulness, we become aware of our mental process. When we notice an afflicted mind arise, we bring a stop to it through seeing the faults. And we eliminate it through cultivating a virtuous mind. And thereafter, having cultivated this determination not to steal, not to come under the influence and the control of attachment, now we have a virtuous mind present. And we keep that present. And we keep that virtuous mind of seeing the faults of attachment, rather wanting to be generous towards others, etc. We keep that mind present. And in this way, we strengthen our habituation to a virtuous way of thinking. And we've already started to weaken our habituation to non-virtuous ways of thinking. And the more we do this, repeatedly over a sustained period, we become ever more virtuous in our way of thinking, and our non-virtuous habitual patterns start to weaken and dissipate.
Lamrim gi nga zu go lobcha nyamlen chasan di na di tsaware sanje gi sonya gi nyamlen je gi chasan donda ning bu chasan di tsaware che sanje gi chhe ka che song wei ne sem no de chen mi je wa di ma je gi ngong go che da je wa di ge pa gyun da ji pa gyum sa sam je ba je me ba so ya de cha go re che sem sa mo ri ma je wa de ge ba dun ba je ding ha de ge wo dun ba dun ba ya je ju ya da ane ye chawa de ane yane yando gom japje nibo gongfe de da de ro sa yi gi chue so nyamne de ni go ma dan de tarba tamji gi me toya cha go lamri mi nyamne se di re sang an zu nyamne je sa di cha sa di na de sik ding ni de du de cha go re de ji lo so sem no ru chen mi ge wa da sang bi ri ge jin phe wa ji yu de re sa de de so na di ro de jin ye she sang ni dan da she sar ma.
The sentence then that we just looked at, the ways of constructively transforming the mind are to cause mistaken states of consciousness not to arise and wholesome states of consciousness to be both generated and increased. Within this one sentence that His Holiness has composed, the entire meaning of the Lamaram is there. All the graduated steps to the achievement of liberation and enlightenment are included within this sentence. Because in dependence on the knowledge that we gain through studying the Buddha Dharma, and in dependence on the skill that we gain in meditation on that knowledge, we become ever more mindful of our mental process, ever more aware of our mental process, and on the basis of this mindfulness or awareness of our mental process, we come to recognize the mental states or the consciousnesses that are arising, and in dependence on our knowledge, we can identify those minds, those consciousnesses, as being either virtuous or non-virtuous. Minds to be cultivated and strengthened, minds to be abandoned and eliminated. So in this way, we come in this one sentence to see the entire path from where we are up to the achievement of liberation from suffering and even enlightenment.
zanyon drukta, nyanyon nishu tiki sayadi, sem nyomoba tiki chasa, da sem nuru chenre, di meba suyari. Chasa di ma jeba tiki pa, jima chu ngongwa chi kaya, ye sawa tiki jeba che samda chi meba suyari, di sure. Da nyomo sem nuru chen meba suyari. Sem sambyo ri jie chen, jeba, ma jeba tiki jeba de pewa chigure sayadi, sem sambyo ri karesine, nganzo ke kasur jamba da, ninche, ane chige janshu sem komya, nam chige 저 파신 두개 냠래 진비 냠래 진배 삼다 주림 쇠바 준료 삼대 셰랍 냠래 디소 셈상 이렇게 차고 그래 안 탈바 된 얘기 잠바 아니 디소 당한서 름림나시 제사 디소 차사 셈상 비리 딩한솔이야 마게바디게 파게바 쳐야 돼 게디 차디 야네도 곰체 공부 따야래 디 공부 따와야 나도 누가 세투고 그래 디기도 두고 그래 제사 딩기 탈바 탑지게 보고 와도 두고 그래 해야지 너 나디래다 좀 셔야 돼 손해야 돼
Earlier in the year, when we were concluding the topic of Lodik, of awareness and knowers, we looked at the 51 mental factors. So in dependence on what we studied then, this too should arise in your mind now, that the mistaken states of consciousness, these we looked at, the 6 root afflictions, the 20 secondary afflictions. These are the mistaken states of consciousnesses. These are the consciousnesses that cause us to suffer now and create the causes for further suffering. These are the consciousnesses that when we are expressed, bring suffering to others as well. So it's these that we must prevent from arising, or when they do, to eliminate them through applying an antidote. And the antidotes then are the wholesome states of consciousnesses, which we both need to generate and increase. So these wholesome states of consciousness can be expressed as either the 11 virtuous mental factors, or to look at it in a more expansive way, the way that we usually would be the 6 perfections of generosity, ethical restraint, patience, joyous perseverance, concentration and wisdom, as well as love and compassion, and other consciousnesses such as the mind of definite emergence. So overcoming and abandoning the one class of consciousnesses and developing the other, this is the path to happiness. And in this one sentence here, in dependence on our prior training, we can see the entire path laid out.
데니게다 셈 노트리젠데라 셈 나라베 릭 망보여데 디나데 디차사 요하게 자위 규디 쪼데 가르서데 나주게 nga se nga rashin yutuba nga temba tuba zibe tensin dela tendeli gore shiza nga temba tuba tensin chiza nga sem nutrition zo nga temba tuba tensin di meba syo ko gores chiza di meba syo ba la nga temba tuba zige di yu ka ne singu do ko jimba na shi ngui ni sui di tungu di tungu de jeba che yo de ane de jeba chi de tenjin dewo chunwi tendi ge tupke samda jeba che yo de anze gamji jilya ko ni nga rashin ge tuba jimba na shi 다가라며 동상 지금 그래서 니 동요 두벨로레스 지산 디니게 동요 두벨로디 다셈 상베리디레 니 뭐요 공부지 공제 공바 있나 다셈 엠베리 자와 자위게 자와디 아니 다센 덴진 나 템버투베티베 덴진디 메바스고레스 지산 디소요도 맞아 코와레 탈고레 탈바다 탐지기 메고 도투고레스 나 쪼디레 지산딘 가사 데데 동바의 텐션 송도 집을 로티 마안 자름체 송야디 디고 안에 하고에게 돈달아야 지금유 제년도 돈다데 사보디 송기 있어다 조다 셈상베릭 먼저 가시야스나 동화니 도베 동니 도베 유기 우인이스 라신지다와 신도 도바 하고게 동이 도베 로디 마 냠낸 제타고 조 디나데 마 디송고다 sim sugyo tangtang, sim sugyo tangtang ki da sim marikpa di pa meba suyo, jeba xe samta meba suyo, sim sambo di sugyo tongyo tupe zo di, lo di zawa di sim sugyo tangtang zo di sungor di nan ma da.
Within this same line, taken it to a deeper level, the ways of constructively transforming the mind. We've mentioned the minds to be abandoned and cultivated, but the most powerful way or method to constructively transform the mind is to come to understand and recognize the root cause of all our suffering, the ignorance of self-grasping. Because it's from this ignorance, this consciousness of ignorance, that all our other afflictions arise, and it's from our afflictions that come our various faulty behavior, physical and verbal behavior. So we need to recognize that the root cause of all suffering is the ignorance of self-grasping. So that there is included within the mistaken states of consciousness. And how to overcome this principal mistaken state of consciousness? This is to develop the principal wholesome state of consciousness. And this is the mind that is contrary to an ignorance, which is a wisdom. And one cultivates the wisdom by first recognizing that the ignorance of self-grasping is actually a consciousness of ignorance. In other words, a consciousness that is not in accordance with reality. When one comes to recognize that the ignorance of self-grasping is not in accordance with reality, we will know that this is a mind that is completely faulty, pervaded by being faulty, and therefore needs to be abandoned, certainly should not be followed. Having given rise to this wish to not follow and even abandon the ignorance of self-grasping, one engages in the reflection of how phenomena do exist, how the self does exist. Come to develop the wisdom realizing emptiness, develop the correct view based on dependence arising. And to the extent that we develop the wisdom understanding emptiness, to that extent we embark on the cultivation of the mental path.
I hate to be rude, can you go a bit slow?
Okay.
Very deep and you're going very fast, and I'm so sorry.
Okay, I'll try.
Thank you.
Okay. So to the extent that we cultivate the wisdom understanding emptiness within us, to that extent we embark on the path to happiness. And the path to happiness is a mental path, and it leads to not just any happiness, but the lasting, stable happiness of liberation and enlightenment. So as I mentioned last night, His Holiness here has condensed the vast teachings or the extensive teachings on the profound view of emptiness into this brief text. Similarly, we can see in this one sentence we're looking at here, it's a very short sentence, just a dozen or so words, but within that, such an extensive meaning.
당은 저기 다셈 상보다 남바세디 근데 지고래 세디 상보세디 간시려고 남바세디 간시려고 세야수수 된마 디르 셈상한 지산이 세간 지고래 세 지산이 가래라나 지산이 셈 강께나 토마라니 미디어를 규르데 다지지 셈 바펴보로 여바 로버도 찹춥밤 롱롱보 주와다 디긴 우 술창용하다 내기 견제바 소제징스 안에 데레 림기 류하게 난 주행한 난주 텐데 뭐슈 유숨 요건에 샹라 쇠마대바 집이 릭 타다 셈간바 데니지 릭 셈데라 셈 간바세게 해제 수직 타다 차사 셈 간바세야 돼 만두 지다 셈 간바세 데니지라 오래세 셈 간바 당 세디 바도 데니야
So having recognized then the primacy of mind, as well as the importance to not come under the influence of unwholesome ways of thinking, but cultivate wholesome ways of thinking, His Holiness continues. What are the determinants in this context of unwholesome and wholesome states of consciousness? A state of consciousness once produced may initially cause ourselves to become unhappy, and our previously calm and relaxed state of mind suddenly to become nervously excited or tense. This may then cause our respiration to increase, cause us to sweat nervously, may even lead to illness. From these, in turn, objectionable deeds of body and speech may well follow, which directly, indirectly, or incidentally cause displeasure and hardship for others. All states of consciousness that give rise to such a causal sequence are assigned as harmful.
Sem se di susugi sem samloji ki yodu kala tomar sosorangi de slele de worshipine di kenjene madiwa charo se chagurwa benanga sem control shibata damong azuge lele system di worshine sem nala control ki yombena namsa sosoran madiwa cha sem madiwa chagurwa chajine ne sem chabu subse de sem chabu di garjene ji je host ji leungurwa dene sem longlong bo juala du riba shandagi ngui ni su imin samlodi riba de ma sewu mewa charo gore kasne konro suchimlade konro sandan ji ne ma de shenda dijine yago dijine yago mar sambegi namjuge samlodi pa sewu mewa charo gore siza ane di genjene ane konro suchimlade ma samna uktigina 지금 디 레도 uk창중에서 최고로 konro suchele 창중에 uk창중에 용고래 싫어 지난 디네 용고래 지난 디기 디네 지금 망부 디네섬 konro 유니버 차야 되네 소소 수보래 나zel이야다 아니 지게 디 gen제네 아니 류가기 쩌바나 다 konro 수심을 류 나요권에 현래 측수셔야 아니 류주권에 konro까지 숙체도 류주권에 현래 녀버기야다 안디네 용고래 지난 슈 규숨 요건에 샬라 뇌비게 라샬라 뇌비게 마테와 소야게 삼 지리고래 제산 데니게 삼로디 삼로 대 삼로 안바레 콘로다고 삼로 안바 디나신다 되샤가야다 샨다 카르케베 되샤다 케베네 디니리고르와 디나지 제산 데니게 삼로 릭티게 다 가서 셈 안바세 되는 건도 지동 지된다 지데 셈 안바세 되는 시시고레스 가서 디 데보딜라 rāngāyā mē kīwa shēngāyā mā kīwa suyā nē kāp tēlā dīgī dēbū lē ngāmbā sāni māngōmbā nāyā mā kīwa dūngā nyōyā kī gyūs dēbū nyōyā kī gyū chī kōrā chī sāni sēm ngāmbā rē sī kōrā ngāmbā sē dī sē sō
So here His Holiness is starting to unpack what is meant by unwholesome ways of thinking. Later, wholesome consciousnesses will be presented, but first the unwholesome ones. So here, the way to relate to the Dharma is on a personal level, an experiential level. So if you recall at the time when your mind was at peace, you're calm and you're relaxed, and then something unwanted happened, and one got annoyed or frustrated or perhaps even angry. Immediately, that happy, calm state of mind is lost. One may then also start to panic, breathing more quickly, one's mind becoming agitated and nervously dancing around. But a few moments before, one's mental state was calm and peaceful and spacious. But through the arisal of a harmful way of thinking, an affliction such as anger, that is lost. And from this faulty way of thinking, this has an impact on our physical body too. It's a cause for illness arising. Moreover, when minds like this arise, we lose control of our way of thinking, we are very likely to express how we are feeling now, and verbally speak to others in an abusive manner, physically interact with others in a harmful way. So this illustration is one of where the arisal of the consciousness of anger or annoyance or frustration, but it's the same for the other afflictions. When the mind is calm and peaceful and undisturbed, an attachment or desire for something arises. Our mind is no longer spacious. We're now grasping at something, dominated by wanting things to go our way, wanting to have what we desire. Similarly with the arisal of pride, a formerly spacious mind is lost. Now our mind is dominated by thoughts of perhaps looking down on others. So this we need to come to recognize well within ourselves. And then in addition to this, not only is our happiness lost immediately, but non-virtuous karma is created in this way. And through this, we will suffer in our future lives. So this, in brief, is what is meant by unwholesome minds or harmful minds.
Asim sambo se de dele do de so dele do de rangam shen la chaifu dele do de rangam shen la chaifu de sing shiwi jebu de dewa jebi ki rik nam and sem sambo re se.
Then the next paragraph. The determinants of wholesome states of consciousness, on the other hand, are just the opposite. All states of consciousness that cause the bestowal of the results of happiness and peace upon ourselves and others, either now or in future lives, are designated as wholesome.
Sem makiba charu do lamsa makiba charu sem chapsu charu chesa da dile jamje chen le digi chuna sem begi konru do cho jamje sama ta ba na deji sem lele yubi dikan le de sem makiba chego mare dile do de sem di de lele che che wa shen le digi chuna sem begi sama ta de and digi chuna sem be sam ta de dinigi digi yon ya le ko de dinichen ko digi yon sa dinichen digi yon sa se be te riba digi na jeba chege riba sam ta de ko riba digi na se joya se joya da digi de ne gap chai fu se ne gap li ne shan la dia wa ane rang le sem ki bo mi shan le jamje sam ta de jamje sam ta de ane ka se jamje ga ji shu che na digi lyunga ge joba de ya hu chung go wa lyunga joba ya hu de ne gap de ko du de mi shan da digi sem la ki bu so ya da an so so ina ke ka la de la ya an digi le sa be le ge je bu ine mo ba ne an rang le de wa shan la digi tu ya che sa ne ga da mo ba ne de cha fu ni ga le ya an digi tu digi de digi yung go res che sa de ni ge sem de sang bo re sa ji be ne ga ju ge kong zhu ge do cho jam je sam da de sem sang bo kong zhu di da sem ngan ba du xin ne ko yi ge da je bu de yong ta de le ne ga da mo bu pu ni ga le pen bi ge jam ba sam da ne ga da pu ni ga le pen ba ti yung go re kong zhu ge de ne ga da ma ji wa xian mo ba ne ya ma ji ba ya du ga ya cha ge do de za jam je se be ro shi da do shuo de jam je de de sem sang bo se 잠재 세 공부하는 내가 불라 디기야 몽비기 되고야 디기야 개와치마 제가 차푸 내가 숨가를 핑거래 제래 공로 디기 아니 내가 때 미디어와 김마기버스야 몽바네 마기버 요야기 량한 바사고와
As I said in the previous segment, as soon as an affliction arises, for example, anger, and again, the affliction doesn't need to arise in a full-blown manner, but even in a milder state, our happiness is lost, our mind becomes unhappy, especially if it's something like anger or attachment, then our mind becomes agitated, disturbed, unsettled. However, if our mind, we're using mindfulness, we're aware of our mental process, and we're keeping our mind on virtue, so we're keeping a consciousness such as love or compassion dominant, then whatever we're encountering, as long as these wholesome, these virtuous consciousnesses are dominant, whatever we're encountering, our mind will stay relaxed and spacious. And this ensures that not only are we ourselves happy, we ourselves are undisturbed by what's happening about us, but our wisdom, our intelligence, these we can utilize, these we can make use of, and we can do so because our mind is relaxed and spacious, it's not agitated. And therefore, we can interact with others in a skillful manner, in a beneficial manner. And thereby, not only do we remain happy now, but recreating the causes, virtuous karma, that will ensure future happiness for us as well, happiness in our future lives as well. Moreover, we are able to interact with others in a skillful manner and thereby be of benefit to them, helping them, for example, develop skills and qualities, or if they're suffering, to lessen the suffering and difficulty they are experiencing. So in these two paragraphs, we see the results of unwholesome and wholesome ways of thinking, completely contrary. And they're contrary in terms of their ripening results, both in the immediate term as well as in future lives. Moreover, they're contrary in terms of the effect they have not just on ourselves, but on those we're interacting with. So in this way, we come to see how harm comes to ourselves and others now and in future lives, or benefit can come to others and ourselves now and in future lives, in dependence on our way of thinking. So here we see that in dependence on our way of thinking, directly, indirectly, or incidentally, we can bring benefit or harm to ourselves and others, and harm that will be experienced now, or benefits that will be experienced now, as well as in future lives.
달로 노트디게 바 지메와 소야리아 네 간치 고르세네 데디순다 노트 쟁기 셈 미게버 제바 양스다 노트 쟁기 셈데 미게버 제바디 먼저 마게버 제야데 가르치 고르세네 제바 양 안에 레자 샤주에다 리부사와다 양 니기 시버 대비게 담바 미사와 쇠바 니 투부쿠와 대비게 데메 쇠비게 다시 남기 최세 편바리 송 레송 용 시바 잠레 푸나 안에 펜레 뇌삽 뇌삽 뇌치위 직망사 그래서
Then continuing to the next paragraph. As for ways of preventing mistaken states of consciousness not to arise, there are such means as undergoing brain surgery, taking various types of tablets, making our awareness dull as if overcome with drowsiness, and making ourselves senseless as if in a deep sleep. However, apart from only occasional superficial help, these mostly do more harm than good from the point of view of long-term solutions.
셈 노트기 되게 셈 간바 되게 매와 쇠야라 당아지 같이 샤쇼데 맨주 제제네 매와 쇠야요 말에서 우르와다 근데 지게 나 리부사체 매와 쇠야요 말에서 대제상 안주기 가르용을스네 셈 마치 바다 배 셈리아 강망고 제된 안주기 장동야다 리부사야다 되는 연구로 와 작사야다 디 세바이나 고 낙톰톰 저셈 미사와 쇠 내가 고시 되세 강한 매바스 지게 셈마기바디 멍은바 잠마도 아니 디기 아니 가르쳐서네 셈려야 재미도치 잠바간 매바 하모고니서 하모고 차도 디기 풀 뉴거레스 마도 내가다 셈 강아 유디갑라 창아라 동제 미부사시나 되었다 셈 대지 원도 규디어데 그 잠디라서야 차고르데 이내 셈디 매바 소요 마디나 가서 가지고디 잠바 밑에 봐자 리포 마세바 소샤 리포 세고 매바셔다 하모고 소샤로와 세상한테 비르멘 잡아다 집아차고로와 셈 강아 여바디 맨 사시네 맨디 소와 하모고 소샤르마도 니 강아디 매바 소요 마로 진짜 디니자 디기 내가 펜바로 지가서 펜기도 셈베 삼로 연구레데 내가 되는 연구레네 디기 풀이야 누구레스 누구레스 아 다들 리부사와나 강아저 창동자와나 라진드데 내 강아 매버 능거데 이네 푸푸풀 누구레스디 펜데 내갑데 마데 풀 누구레스 그러와데자
As stated here, in the world, then techniques for dealing with mental unhappiness include perhaps surgery, as well as taking medication or intoxicants. And all these do is dull our senses. So whilst they may give us some temporary relief through being in a state that's similar to being anesthetized, dulling our intelligence, dulling our consciousness, this is all that it can lead to. Certainly even in the short term, from engaging in such behavior, more problems and difficulties can arise. So the temporary benefit can be very short-lived, and more problems can come, for example, alcoholism or reliance on prescription medication. But certainly, this is not a lasting solution. And the temporary relief that may be experienced may be very temporary indeed, but certainly not a lasting solution.
ane ko tse xiaxue xie ane ko lu yi xiaxue xie men ju xie lu yi na ze de se chung gu gang se chung gu wa sem ji gang di de ni gi men ju xie se tu ya me ba re xie dan an zu gi ane se me ba xie me ba re se xie di sung gu ra ji le ba xiaxue xie ba xiaxue ge se tu gu ma se de da sem ji gang se da lu yi na ze ru de ina men ju xie ko na ze me ba su tu gu re sem ji gang di men ju xie me ba su tu gu ma re se gu wa.
To rely on techniques such as these, for example, surgery, medication following medical advice to overcome physical illness, this is good to do, and it can and does lead to the illness healing. But for mental illness, a long-term solution requires something additional. Such solutions in the long term does not lead to relief.
Ribu sawa ta sawa yang ni yi siwa tabi tempa miso sowa sedu jisanga je kanga semje kanga mangbo de en chang de de ribu sa yo ne tene semdi ni kuwa na shi miso so she ba le ma to kanga de me ba so yo ma le jisanga nga zu cho nyo ai me ba de so she cho me se ba so she wa je 지난디 뉴버디 바 창도에 리버스 뉴버디 파 예로도 뉴버디 냠로도 야자 강한데 레용 거래. 제가 강한 매버 sö요 바네 뉴버디 바 예베네 고 강한데 용어야 말와. 지난디 고 리부스에 창도디 가서 미사와 니쿠바네 sö셔래 마도 세부 매버 sö셔래 마도 강한데 매버 sö요 말. 제가 고 리부다 창도베네 디기 뉴버디 파 냠리 예송바네 야자 강한데 레용 거래서.
From one's experience, one knows that there's some truth to this, in that if one takes medication, whether prescription or non-prescription, or takes intoxicants, there is an immediate following of dullness and an easing of one's suffering. But this effect wears off. It is temporary. It is not a lasting solution.
yang ni tubo kubo tabo jame soyi gi tab nam gi chela pembi gi pamba rezung yong si ba zamle se ro jiza dang an ju gi pe sem ka nga thi pe cha ribo sa sha ba na pe ni kuan jame jik pa jinyu ga me ba cha di di ne ga bring de la nuba de mai pa ne ga bring de la ka ya ma den ba za sem ya ka nga di ka me de ga cha go ro ba je de jik pamba yong si ba ra che zam ma do The
text continues, however, apart from only occasional superficial help, these mostly do more harm than good. So a point is being made here which is important. Apart from only occasional superficial help. So it's not that, for example, taking a medication for mental illness should not be done. There is benefit that can come from this, but it should be recognized that this is not certain and it's not going to be long-lasting, or it's not going to give a lasting result in terms of eliminating the cause.
Jisa digi da zamle pune panle nösap chejik nösap chewi rik mang side dene pulia nösap cheyung gor karasane semля dingi meba kan che dingi meba soyade dine yane pene yang nyuba de yero de kangale de yangja chang dine supolia naza soyada kangate chikche ane denegi ane semlia ko riba mesiyochidu cheba cheyage samno tayagi riba chine riba se taya mewa chaza nesep che ne nazi mangbolya chagore chizan ribu di pa se ne nega bring su ni si tom ni kuba na che nega bring che kanga mena ya niba yedu dati kanga yadu ya riba se yane yadu dine supolya ne nazi leyada supol kanga cheyada pe chigi supu pando mewa chaya kedi inada mashiba dine chig tom che deoga chage kanga chikche ndi mazir da rigba da bejudan mera rigba metumba sewu mewa soje ba za di yagdu yawa cheje yagbo dige pa nyamle da duga dige pa mewa soedi samdai mewa chade dige pula nugore che za dinige pembale nuege ma ngore che.
So whilst there can well be some short-term benefit to engaging in techniques like this, not only are these not a long-term solution to mental difficulties, through over-reliance on some of these methods, further problems can come. For example, if one either takes too many prescription medication, too much prescription medication, or keeps drinking, this can lead to further physical problems. Our physical problems growing, or perhaps even new instances of mental illness developing. So again, whilst there often is some short-term benefit, this is not a long-term solution at all. Because these do not resolving the problem at the underlying cause, one will continue to suffer, and in fact one's suffering may grow and increase, leading to one taking ever more intoxicants, for example. And a further problem of this technique is that as one dulls one's mind to try and forget about one's problems, our intelligence, our wisdom is dulled, is impeded. And this prevents us from developing or applying any long-term solutions because of this mental dullness. So therefore, we stay lost, we stay suffering without a long-term solution because of impeding our own intelligence.
Da denege da nganzuge sem ngamba de meba swele menju che da ribu se da changra tunga denege meba swe tu ma re che da meba swe ma tu ba da na sem sangbo ngamba di meba kan swe go re swe thang kan je lamna da den ma di sung go re dene zangbo ru ju chu lo ngan be rik ni mi san be ko ne lo di ngo nyong we ngo che ba che dene sangbo rwa sangpur chusu lo nganpe rik nyemik sampe kwane lo di ngo nyongwe ngo cheba ches. Dene sangpur lo chusu lo nganpe rik nyemik sampe kwane lo di ngo nyongwe ngo cheba ches. Dede ko lo sangpur chetang dine shio gore se.
So here, His Holiness is discouraging us from relying primarily on such techniques. Now he continues, therefore the way of beneficially transforming the mind is as follows. First, one must think about the disadvantages of unwholesome states of consciousness, identifying them from one's own personal experience.
제가 당한 저기 롱한 바디 파규와 나저 로상비 직디규 로상비 지가 저기 규고 보러 제가 되니기 주세 가르쳐데 예미 삼당 오래 제배는 아주 컨트롤 시스템에다 컨트롤디 파 롱한 바디 디버규와 나저 로상보디 잠지 이릭데 나저기 규를 맞히고 그래 제가 딩이디 제가다 될야 주주 가르치고서 당보 컨트롤딜이야 미체 컨트롤딜이야 예미 삼당 교행 가르용도 컨트롤 사바나 교행 가르 내가 교행 가르용도 풀을 교행 가르용도 랑라 교행 가르 셴의 교행 가르용도 세비게 예미 삼당 도시는 컨트롤 사바나 제가 컨트롤 사바나 컨트롤 견지의 소설이야 셈마기와 차야 아니 소설게 잘라 쳐라 따야 소설게 뒤져 쳐라 따야 소설에서네 칼라사나 칼라 신부 매바 소설이야는 조번님도 미팅바 차야 그거 이게 미팅바 차야 되게 안에 소설이야 안지게 니후에는 니야기고 막거든 도신 다시 컨트롤 사바나 강아되네 그냥 망보 망고 지용도와 선배 삼다야다 되게 안에 컨트롤 사바나 안에 뒤에 컨트롤 견제네 현리아 칭간발라 안에 소설가 가보디게네 막고서야 가보면봐서야 샘타링보서야 안신 마기보서야 안 되게 저게 용도와 되네서데 컨트롤들 되는데도 세 컨트롤이 괜히 가르가르 용구요 제상 컨트롤 사바나 내가 교인 가르도 랑래 펜바 가르용도 현래 펜바 가르도 현래 녀바 가르용도 두제 제바 체연도 컨트롤 디기 컨트롤 사바나 라신 니가라 내가 푸다 차상라 녀바지마도 펜바 용구민도 제상 컨트롤 사야디 제상데 배 두지야샤다디 윤에 자와기네 야구민도 되면봐 쇠고도 선배 다는 컨트롤 독초를 가르요래서는 잠바셔야 돼. 샹리아 잠바 대화도 되네. 샹리 야구용나 선배 샹리 잠바섬 당바네. 잠바 공바나 잠바디기 랑을 누기뒤에 샹리 누기도 가르치고도 랍나. 소소 잠자섬 당바이나 아니 내가 될이야 소소에 셈 흘려 시대. 아니 지기 잠바 요바나 잠제 요바나 랑게 쪽바나 그 거원이와도 튜부샤야. 아니 지기 계시 셰바네 샹리아 직점 야고셰야 넘규되면은 야고되야 안기셰바다 장고셰야 되네요 아니 샹 되네시여도 랑게 넘규도 야고체도 파쇼이네 안술이야 상보체야 콘조이네 셈을 흘려쳐야 셈이 르디 이셰 야고차야 되네 용도 되네서 잠비기 콘트그 도초게 잠바데라 아니 괜데데데 괜데데데 도와 셈비게다 권유 콘트그 괜지를 콘트 빼는 거 빼를 콘트를 괜장야 괜가는 거래 용도도 제바신 님질량한 저기도 제바시도 콘트 해야 돼 야고 자와기네 미도 셈비기 뭐 셈래 오초 용구랬다 콘트 괜마다 내가다 타도다 라나 셴니가 괜지마도 야보세도 용야기 자와기네 미도 셈비게 셈래 오초 바지 리기리스 제가 셈는 오초발 레어도 다다 컨트롤도 균이 끼주기 민우 셈베다 컨트롤 끼야리아 가바 가야게 탑람디 딜리기래 진짜 컨트롤 도죠 잠지 삼다이 딜리기래 해서 그래서 두치네 균 삼다는 오초바시 용그래서 되니 지나네 오초여도 라신이고 마음에 봐서야래 배 듬바다 되녀도 숙침불이고 그래제
The sentence here is of great importance. One must think about the disadvantages of unwholesome states of consciousness, identifying them from personal experience. So if we apply this then to, for example, the afflictive mind such as anger. And anger can be a useful one to start with because it's so easy to recognize as being harmful. So one here needs to come to know what is meant by anger, its gradient of expressions from frustration, annoyance up to full-blown rage, and see the effect that it has on oneself and others, now and in future lives. So here we need to learn and come to understand the results of the varying afflicted minds. But not only learn as in terms of intellectual knowledge, not learning just a list of harmful afflictions, not even learning some detail behind them in terms of their results, but really coming to know this to be true, to know that they are pervaded by being harmful from our own experience. This is the second key point made in this sentence. We need to develop knowledge, and that knowledge needs to be based or mixed with our own personal experience. Because we can all agree that anger is harmful. We know that it destroys relationships. When one's in a fit of rage, one may even destroy one's own valued and treasured possessions. Anger often doesn't quickly dissipate, and thereby prevents us from sleeping, or we lose our appetite. And others will stay away from us. We have a reputation for being angry, easily enraged. Others will keep their distance from us. So we need to see this in the sense of not just learning it, but see it as a truth for us based on our own experience. Moreover, we look at the impact, in addition to ourselves, the impact that our anger has on others. Certainly, it's clear if we express it, but even if we manage not to express it, we are likely still to show it, to radiate this inner rage to others. And we see the harm that brings to others right now, that we end up inadvertently adding to the burden of difficulties that others have to carry. So in this way, we think about the faults that come from each affliction, such as anger, to ourselves, secondly, to others, and that's encompassed in the short term, the immediate term, and then in addition to this, long term, so our future lives through the accumulation of negative karma. So anger is one illustration. Then we think of its opposing mind, that of love. So love, then, we need to come to understand what is meant by love, and then to understand the impact that love has. In the same way as with anger, we look at the impacts it has on ourselves and others, in both the short, immediate term, as well as the long term, future lives. We see that when love is dominant within our mind, we are happy. Happy meaning our mind is spacious, peaceful and calm. We can utilize our wisdom to be of benefit to others no matter what we're encountering. And instead of harming others, we actually can through interacting skillfully with others, we can ease their burden of suffering rather than add to their burden of suffering. So therefore, by us being loving, not only do we benefit ourselves, but others. And moreover, we create causes for happiness in future lives as well. So we think like this, of the faults that come from the afflictions to ourselves and others in this and future lives, and the benefits that come from virtuous ways of thinking, such as love, to ourselves and others in this and future lives. And again, we do this through 1, gathering knowledge, 2, through reflection, coming to see through our own personal experience the validity of the presentation. And thereafter, we continue to reflect on this again and again and again. And the purpose of this is to become habituated to the faults of each afflicted mind and the benefits of each virtuous mind. And through doing so, and relying on mindfulness, being mindful of our mental state, when we notice the arisal of an affliction such as anger, immediately we will identify it as anger, as an affliction, and as harmful. And thereby, we will have the strength of mind to recognize that anger, for example, is not only a cause, because it's a cause of suffering, it is never justified, it's never righteous, and therefore we will be determined not to be deceived by the affliction, not to being deceived and thinking that it's justified, and rather we will eliminate it through developing its opposing mind, in this case, love.
당한 저 강아 용하게 지시리고 제가 되는서 콘로서 따보로 시도 삼다나 콘로기 기용도네 소설이야 가르치기도 샹라 가르치기도 내가 가르도 풀을 가르용도 소이 교연다 연된 가르도 홀이야 교연 망아도 연된 망아도 있도 제바지도 교연장야 통용으로 제가 교연셔 통용으로 제가 되네 콘로데 자오기네 야본 디기 주기면 오선백에 듬바리고 제자데 만주고 로 냠바데 교와다야디 상 당타데 당보 로 냠바디 파다 뭐송 데리야 교연다 연된 파기야바 제바제제 또 제바제 고모 어딘지 도와서 베게 제바제도 되네 강점질이야 그 나중에 삼나는 용외 돈에 어디든지 교회는 짱짱레샤 선배게 삼노 이래 되네 레도 로상부 교와 땅도 그래서 디나지 바다 나야로치네 되네 나야 롱안 바래 지상 나야 제바이나 나야 오와 삼노 칸리 디기 제바이나 라할 판도 가르도 샬라 판도 가르도 갈린 풀을 간도 판도 가르고 또 제바시 삼다도 그 교회 오와 된 교회 바디 모처용으로 데니기 직접하체다다 가서 샘나 교화다다 당보 데니기 롱안베리틀 교회다 연된 가르도스 제바체 고래서 제바체는 샘하고 그랬다 제바 심주지나 하고 그래서 세상에서 마신 와 당보 가르도 제바체 심주지나 하고 그래 디나신다 고 제바체 심주지나 하고 그래 하고 해도 교회 하고는 되더니 대바균이 이게 말했다디 가야ля 디 남사 가야리기에서 그러다
So here, the advice that His Holiness is giving is that we need to gather knowledge and reflect on that knowledge, and reflect on it not in a merely intellectual way, but in a personal way, coming to see whether the presentation is true or not. We see whether it's true or not through applying it to our own life. Because all our problems come about through not understanding reality, through ignorance. And here, let's take ignorance in a broader sense, and not misunderstanding reality in a broader sense. We all too often think that in a particular situation, an affliction such as anger can be justified, can be beneficial. So that here, we are not understanding reality. And because we are not understanding reality, we may allow ourselves to come under the control of an affliction such as anger or attachment or pride, and from that our suffering is amplified. So what we need to do is gather knowledge and then reflect on that knowledge, investigate it for ourselves, coming to see whether it's true or not. And so with both the afflicted minds as well as virtuous minds, we look at all of them in a similar way. We first take an affliction, whether it's anger or whether it's pride, or a virtuous mind such as love, and we ask ourselves, from this mind, does benefit come or harm? And how do we determine that? Short-term and long-term, self and others. So we ask ourselves, if pride arises, for example, is this benefiting me in the short term and through the accumulation of karma in the long term? And in terms of others, when pride arises in me, does that benefit others now in the short term and in the long term? So this is the technique for each of the afflicted minds and virtuous minds. Ask ourselves, are they beneficial or harmful in the short and long term for self and other? We do so by looking at our experience in life, what we ourselves have directly experienced, what we have also observed. In this way, we come to know ourselves better. And the more we reflect like this, especially if it's in a sustained meditation, a sustained meditation habit, a daily practice, we'll come to know ourselves ever more. And in this way, we'll be able to integrate deeper what we learn in the classes. And that through this integration, the spiritual development, we'll be able to turn away from habitual ways of thinking that we now have come to recognize as harmful. And we'll ensure that we ever more are under the influence of the ways of thinking that we have come to see clearly are beneficial.
나 데니기 컨트롤디 다 데니기 도 삼다 다 컨트롤 간스 기도 안서 도 삼다 왜네 컨트롤 간스 기도 스네 나보 안서 나래 나 세비게 삼로 실리고라 나 세데 지사다 나 세 삼조데 나 디제고도 셈비 소소기 되바 실리고래 지사 소소기 되바 대다 미튼 바직 미션다 지게 소소기 되바 시어로다 나 디제고도 셈비게 직 삼로 징아 세바다 나 세바 나지기 나진 로지기 되네 나지 멜로디 나 디제려야 나 디제고도 셈비게 삼로 되바 실리고래 지상 소소기 되바 대다 미튼 바직 파줘되게 소소 되바데 케멜 미튼 바이나 텔라 콘리고래 소소기 되바 두비야 될래야 아니 파셔되게 바시 지기나 될래야 콘리고래 이게 리고래 다 소소기 되바 매바지요로 바다 내가 디나세 나디 고구메 담보 나섬데 딩아디 고구메에서 지 되바 매바지요로 봐 되바 매바들라 미션다 되게 될래야 되바 제바이나 네 나서 될래야 아니 콘리고래 근데 소소기 칼라 제모제게 되바기네 매바지가 나 디디 제모데 고구메스 되바 매바네 미션다 어디 제모데 야고르제 오르는 콘랑게로와 다 소소기 때 제모로시 베베 나세 삼다딩 이 제모데 지긴세 되바 시우주여바네 대산다 디 제모데 제쇼 말이 제쇼 말라나 콘라 세세 제사 담봉 알아서 콘란데 가서 담봉 알아서 삼문나 가서 나세 삼르리거래 나 세베 삼르리네 나 소소라디 니 디치기 니 디치 고구메 셈비기 소소기 되바지리거래 지산 소소기 되바디다 파쇼 미디기 소소 되바디 미튼 바제야다 소소기 되바 두비야데라 바시 지기도 셈베 삼로 지기도 셈베 삼르리 남도 지기도 되는 파쇼들 콘로란 거래 지산 콘로랑에기 규디 자위 규디 갈레워스네 소소기 되바데 미튼 바데라 아니 콘로제 대양 되바데 소소기 되바데야 나보 마세베 나진딜 나진딜 때네 아니 되바데 미튼 바데라 때네 콘로 기고래 제가 두스네 콘로 간지 기기도 세베 심주시나 되는 용고래 세데
The process that I've just identified is important because in order to become the person that we can become, we need to gather knowledge, but not leave it at a mere shallow intellectual insight, but rather develop it into a deeply felt conviction and eventually into direct experience. So this comes about in dependence, gathering knowledge and reflecting on it in the way that I've presented. And as one does so, one will be able to go to deeper and deeper levels of reflection. So for example, I've been using mainly the illustration of anger. So we've come to recognize that anger is always harmful. Then we can ask ourselves, so where does anger come from? So we get angry usually because either someone or an event, a circumstance, is acting in a way that is contrary to our wishes. Our wishes aren't being fulfilled. An unwanted circumstance, or what someone has said or done, or not said or done. So others we see as acting against our wishes, or circumstances being against our wishes. And then we get angry. And this can happen in so many circumstances. And especially when we understand anger as not just being full-blown rage, but all the subtleties, the subtler expressions of that. So for example, when one's watching sport, and your team is playing badly, and one's mind is not light and spacious. Emotions are rising. Now we may not call that anger, but it's within that class. Our team are not living up to our expectations. They are not fulfilling our wishes. They are underplaying against their potential and they're losing. Or the opponents, they are not acting in accordance with our wishes. They're playing too well. So from this, our afflictions arise. And why? Our wishes are not being fulfilled. Our wishes are not being fulfilled. So this term our or my or I, it's from this, the way we are relating to ourself, our I. This is where the mistake comes from. My wishes are not being fulfilled, therefore I'm getting angry. This person is not talking to me in the way that I deem appropriate, therefore I am getting angry. The way we relate to the I is the basis from which our afflictions arise.
Yuen Karadu, Yenden Karadu, Sine Chevache, Tabene Conrad Award, Digi Shevandu, Samta, and the Yonta, and the Canis Can Yungu, Simbedu, Digi Shevanashi, and do some diety, Yeshimuchale, that didn't de Shashana, and then Jemada, then Mahmoud Shuashe.
Then to summarize very briefly what we've looked at thus far, is His Holiness has presented the importance for changing our way of thinking. So last night we spoke about how our suffering and our happiness is primarily dependent on our way of thinking. So therefore, through changing our way of thinking, we can reduce suffering and increase happiness. So here now, His Holiness has been presenting the importance to identify which ways of thinking are unwholesome because they lead to suffering for self and others in this and future lives, and which are wholesome or virtuous because they lead to happiness for self and others in this and future lives. Having recognized that, and then not only do we need to identify these, but we need to identify them in a deep way, so we can take mere knowledge and deepen it within ourselves, so we gain conviction of this. And in dependence on conviction, we will then, with mindfulness, guard ourselves from coming under the influence of unwholesome ways of thinking and ensure our mind, our way of thinking, stays wholesome. So if you have some questions, then we have a few minutes, then please feel free to ask. Alan.
Geshe mentioned last night that in the definition of perfection, that it only applies to only Arya Bodhisattvas practicing the perfection. That's how I understood it. Does that mean that the Bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation and preparation are not practicing these 6 perfections?
So Geshe last night said that only Bodhisattvas are practicing perfections, and the way I understood that was that it's Arya Bodhisattvas. So what about ordinary Bodhisattvas on the paths of accumulation and preparation? Are they not practicing perfections? Yeah.
지구를 내가 파르도 침바 세대 파괴 기준의 파르도 침바스네 코위게 타 세딩하는 코 타디 녀모바 바차 사보나 제바 디방야게 된다래 대빈 진비 파신 중에 동방이 검제 냠내제디 지루한테 솔람바 졸라마 차상 지고래.
So it doesn't apply only to Arya Bodhisattvas, but all Bodhisattvas. All Bodhisattvas are engaging in the 6 perfections, because the term perfection is literally, or the term that's translated as perfection is literally going beyond. What does it refer to going beyond? Going beyond suffering. So the Bodhisattvas on any path are focusing on going beyond suffering so that they can benefit others. Or to translate perfection differently, transcend. So to attain a state of transcendence, to transcend suffering, to go beyond to the far shore, to transcend suffering, means that Bodhisattva is meditating or practicing in order to attain liberation and enlightenment, in order to benefit others. So it's all Bodhisattvas. Okay. The back?
My question is just on ego and our past life, and how unconsciously we can then, because of the effect of those seeds, unconsciously then we can display behaviour, and I know that one of you today was to reflect and develop our behaviour, but my question actually is, will we be going into that more in this text?
Going into?
Into ego and past life and the seeds of that affecting our unconscious behaviour. Because today we talked about developing our self-knowledge and reflection. Will we actually be going into the nitty-gritty of that more? Because all of us would be affected by that.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll continue with that from next time, where we'll be looking at how to develop more wholesome qualities within ourselves.